but I am just so thrilled that he agreed to come here, and because he's such a great expert in this. Jay?
Thank you. Hello. I'm Jay Beaumont. I'm retired now, but I used to be with the Orange County Water Authority. In that capacity, other stuff first. First of all, I went and got a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from the University of Illinois, and I have an MBA from the University of Chicago. And after I got in working with the Water Authority, before that I was a consultant, I came here for the water loop back in the 80s, perhaps you remember. In 1992, the water loop was determined it couldn't pay for itself, so they hired me to figure out what to do next. And the answer was groundwater and water conservation. So, what I want to do tonight is I want to talk to you about groundwater, specifically in Orange County. And so I've got a model here that talks about kind of the fundamentals of groundwater. But that map over there is a map of Orange County, and it shows the aquifers. And it also shows the watersheds for the surface water supplies for the various communities. So I'll just point to it from here. The pink, you see the pink colors? Those are aquifers that are unconsolidated, sand and gravel, direct infiltration from the surface. The bluer ones are also sand and gravel, but they have a clay layer on top. So the water has to come into those from the side. It's not direct infiltration. The yellow ones are primarily finer grained aquifers, sands, silts, and clays, so they don't produce as much water as the blue and the red do. And then you might see some green up there. The green are sand and gravel deposits, but they are above the water table. So I'm going to point some areas out, and Mr. Video Man, perhaps you want to, oh, I'm sorry, you've got to eat and shoot. I'll get it out of your way. Thank you. I'll go over here. Let's start from the western part of the county. Here's Deer Park. This large pink area is the Neversink River, and the aquifer underneath it is very prolific. New York City has dibs to all that water. Anything that goes out of, this is the Delaware River Basin, anything that, or New York State that comes out of the Delaware, and there's a bunch of reservoirs upstream, can only go to New York City by interstate compact. Okay, you see this purple area here? That's the watershed that feeds the reservoirs for Port Jervis. This purple area here is the watershed of the Shongum Kill, and it feeds via pipeline into these three reservoirs for the city of Middletown. So Middletown has three reservoirs, right here, here, and here, in the town of Wallkill and some in the town of Mount Hope. And then they supplement that with a diversion dam, it's called the Kinch Dam, on the Shongum Kill to keep those reservoirs full. Down here, large pastel area, is the black dirt. Incredible aquifer under the black dirt. Many, many years ago, the Rykowski brothers, perhaps you remember, were going to sell water to the village of Goshen, and it was a big uproar, and it never happened. But they would have put a well down into the aquifer underneath here and pumped water out, and frankly, it wouldn't have made any difference. It took 1 million gallons a day out. There's so much water there, it wouldn't have made any difference. But I'm not the politician. But you notice it's clay. You see the blue? The reason the black dirt is because it was a wetland for zillions of years. It's my favorite number, zillions. Okay. The wetland vegetation grew, died, decomposed, and repeat over and over and over again, so that you got this thick layer of muck soils. But the reason that it was muck soils and wetlands because there was a clay layer underneath it and the water couldn't soak in. So it just sat there like a big bowl, so it was a giant wetland. Today you couldn't touch it. Back when the pioneers showed up, they dug ditches and made it one of the highest producing agricultural areas in the state. But all because of that thick, like 60-foot thick, clay layer underneath the muck, and under that, a really porous sand and gravel layer. Moving across down here, Monroe, there's a watershed for the village of Monroe, Mombasha Lakes here. This whole big purple area here, West Point, and Cornwall on Hudson water supplies. This side of the ridge is Cornwall and Hudson. The rest of this is all reservoirs for West Point. Up here, this is the watershed area for the city of Newburgh. Up there, the watershed area extends into Ulster County for Chadwick Lake, town of Newburgh. Over here, a little red area, surface water supply for the village of Goshen. If you see some circles, these are municipal wells. We put circles around them to designate a wellhead protection area, an area that you don't have to own it, at least the little bullseye you have to own. The big circle you just have to control. So if a community has a well, they just monitor really closely what goes on in that area. The town of Wallkill has a series of wells along the river right here. Perhaps you know Rykowski Lane off of Crystal Run Road. Back there, it looks like a bank, but it's really a water treatment plant, the Rykowski Lane Trent, and they have their most prolific wells. A couple of their wells can do 600 gallons a minute, which is really good. Now the question, somebody had a question. What about the new well for the town of New Windsor? Who had that question? Okay. Hold that thought. Does anybody else have a question? Because I'll hear your questions, and then I'll try to adapt my presentation. But first, let me look this lady right here.
The Walker River is somewhat polluted, so if you draw water from near the Wallkill River, I would assume the water comes from the Wallkill River, infiltrates to, or not necessarily?
That's correct. The question was, or the comment actually, is that the Wallkill River is somewhat polluted. The answer to that is yes. A lot of stuff comes off that black dirt, besides black dirt. And yes, when you have wells along the Wallkill River or along the Moona Creek in Washingtonville, you do draw water from that river, but you have a natural filter, many hundreds of feet of gravel and sand that in effect act like a filter, and then you put it through a series of other filters and oxidation chemicals and ultraviolet lights and chlorine.
Okay, that's if you're getting town water.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so let me keep going, okay? Now, I got a couple more hands up. Let me get there, here, and here. So right here.
When you are talking about groundwater, is it typical to have a single layer of water or?
No. It's not typical to have a single layer of water. Hold on.
Can you repeat the question?
No, I'm sorry. The question was, when you're talking about groundwater, is it typical to have a single layer of water? And the model will show that. We'll get to that in a little bit when we get to the model, okay? But the answer, the easy answer, the short answer is no. It's not typical to have a single layer. Okay.
Okay. Well, you mentioned, Pine Island and that area with regard to a huge supply. Does it, because that soil is extremely acidic, does that filter down into the water, and is the water that you would draw out of that, would that be acidic, or is that filtered out?
The question is, the water at the surface near Pine Island and in the black dirt is acidic. Does that acidity, low pH, work its way down with the water? The answer is probably to some extent, but the clay layer is not perfect, I'm sure. So, and the water does come into the sides, or else it wouldn't be an aquifer, because if it didn't recharge. Okay. If the water is acidic, then, and if it was drawn out for a public supply, it would be treated with caustic soda to raise the pH. Other way around, if you get a very alkaline water, they'll add some acid to balance the pH. Okay, hold on. I owe this guy.
Oh, sorry.
So looking at this map, it looks like somebody surveyed Orange County. Is that true? Has there been actual survey where people are probing the earth periodically, I don't know what that means, every 100 feet, every 1,000, whatever it is, to make a map like this?
This map is actually the layers, the color layers are from the U.S. Geological Survey. I don't think that they probed every 100 feet to get that, but they probably used a combination of field studies plus remote sensing like aerial photos, where they can spot stuff using various.
So it's pretty accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't bet the dinner that it's going to be within the next 10 feet, but you know, it's in the ballpark for sure. And that's all they need. The geologist then will go out with his drill rig and look at the lay of the land and get it real accurate. But this is a good first step. I had one here and then there, and then there.
This is not as personal a question as an individual question as it might sound. My property in the town of Crawford, right, the Shangam Kill is my line, you know, my property line along. And I have a private well, you know, it's a number of, you know, several hundred, if not 1,000 feet off of the kill. Very high iron content in the water, very clay, you know, like soil in some cases, and also very acidic, right? Right. So my water from the well on my, you know, property is not from the Shangam Kill, right?
Tell me how deep your well is.
It's a deep 135 feet, seems to be there.
Probably into the bedrock. Okay, the question was, hey, I got a piece of property along the Shangam Kill up in the town of Crawford. I got a well that's maybe a couple 100 feet away from the Shangam Kill. It's acidic, it's got a lot of iron in it, and it's got a lot of colloidal clay in it. Is that what you're telling me? It's dirty?
The water's not dirty, when it comes out, the iron, you know, is the problem. But it's very hard to dig a hole in some places, you know, on the property. Also, what was I gonna?
Well, you think about that, and then we get to a couple others,
thank
okay?
you.
I owe that guy in the yellow shirt, and then you.
Jay, you may not know the answer to this. It's a general question. You know, the Catskill Aqueduct is going to be shut down for maintenance in, I believe, 2017.
I believe.
Yeah. You think that it's going to affect a lot of communities, at least in Orange County? Do you think that this area will be ready for the shutdown?
Oh, they've been planning this for 10 years.
Yeah, that's.
Okay, so the question was, what's going to happen when they shut down the Catskill Aqueduct, which runs like right down here, goes under the runway at Stewart, and then kind of cuts over by right over here, crosses 207, and then goes over by Cornwall, dips down underneath the Hudson River, and ends up on the other side, and ends up in Kensico Reservoir in Westchester. They've been planning it for 10 years. New Windsor gets their water from the Catskill Aqueduct. City of Newburgh, you read in the paper today, is going to switch over to the Catskill. That's their third source. Cornwall and Hudson, KJ doesn't get their water yet because their pipeline's not done. But Cornwall and Hudson has 3 sources. One of them's the aqueduct, one's a well field on the Moona Creek, and one's the reservoirs up here. Okay, those are the 3 main Catskill Aqueduct municipalities that take that water.
What's wrong with Newburgh water now?
Excuse me, you're next to the line, but I got to get a couple. I'll get this guy and then that guy and then you and then you. Okay, and I still owe the lady with the Moona Creek well, in New Windsor. Okay, who was I pointing at? Yes.
Does it start out as ice and then get grinded into groundwater?
No, it actually is. It starts off as rain and just soaks in.
So they don't actually have to grind the water for it to be groundwater?
Oh, no. Ground means under
Just under the bowl.
Not round like coffee.
Okay.
Okay. You and then you and then you. Yes, sir.
Do underground streams, especially when they're fast moving, have any bearing on the sudden eruption of the kind of sinkholes such as those that have been happening in Kingston?
Underground streams are a lot rarer than most people think. That's the question. What there's underground streams causing sinkholes up by Kingston. They have a whole bunch in Florida, some other places. Most places, most groundwater, like you'll see in my model, is not in caverns. It is in the spaces between the particles or in the cracks in the rocks. And so if there's sinkholes up by Kingston, it's probably because they have some sort of unconsolidated sand and gravel layer. They've drawn too much water out. They left space, it can collapse. And if you have enough little spaces collapse, you get a big sinkhole. Okay? Okay, who do I know now? Alan?
Yeah. The Crawford area up there,
Yes.
what's that aquifer?
There's none.
Is it through bedrock?
So the Shungum Kills aquifer's right here. Okay? Up there too, they have another sand and gravel aquifer. There's
What about in the middle?
in the middle, this is, if you look closely at my map, you'll see a bunch of dashed lines with little red rectangles. The dashed lines are fractured traces. The geologists drew those. They look at aerial photos, 3D aerial photos, and they say, oh, I can see hills and valleys. Who knows what Pangea is? Okay, everybody knows it. Okay, when all the continents were together. Back then, Africa and New York were next to each other, and they were bumping into each other. And that bumping action fractured the bedrock. So now, if you look at my map, northeast, southwest, lineaments, lines, there's all sorts of little hills and valleys. And then underneath there, the bedrock's fractured. The geologists look for those fractures, and that's where they drill their wells. Because the water's in the cracks. It's like a giant glass of iced tea. The tea's not in the ice, it's in the spaces between the ice, right? Same thing with bedrock wells. Okay, who do I owe? You? And then you. Okay, and I still, this lady, and I still that one.
How did Newburgh's water go bad? And where's Coast Go getting their water now that they have to get aqueduct water?
Okay, two questions. First question, how did Newburgh's water go bad? The answer is, it was always bad, they just started noticing it. when you guys are the scientists, tell me when they started figuring out that they could measure stuff in parts per trillion. Not very too long ago, frankly. It used to be parts per billion and everybody was really happy. Now you're getting 70 parts per trillion of PFOAS, right? They couldn't even measure that 10 years ago. Okay? So now, EPA goes, oh, geez, now we're going to, okay? And the second question, where's KJ getting this water now? The answer is they got a whole bunch of wells.
And what's the problem with that?
There are not enough of them. They punched a hole in everywhere they could punch in the Monroe area. And now they have to go outside.
Why don't the whole town go outside?
Like I said, just about every community in this county that has a water supply gets it from an adjacent community. Look at these watersheds. Port Jervis gets from Deer Park. Village of Warwick gets it from the town of Warwick. West Point gets it from Highlands. Cornwall gets it from Highlands and from town of Cornwall. Chadwick Lake gets it from Ulster County, town of Newburgh. Okay? So everybody goes outside.
And they pay for it, right?
And they pay for it. When you run a 24-inch pipe a long way, that's a lot of money. Yes, sir. Oh, he was first.
I remember a plan a couple of years ago to take water out of the Wallkill River. I think
Out of the
were around.
Wallkill River?
Yeah, and
There was a plan to have a reservoir up here
were you around at that point?
in the 80s.
Yeah, probably a while ago.
Yeah, the water loop plan.
Yeah.
The water loop would have had a reservoir up here near Pine Bush.
Right.
Yeah, whatever
And
happened
they
to
would
that
have
plan?
diverted water out of the Shangon Kill to fill it. Would have sent it in a pipeline over to somewhere along 17K here in Montgomery for the water treatment plant.
Yeah.
Put it in a big pipeline that follows 84 and 17, the loop part, right? And send water to Middletown and down to Monroe and KJ and over to Newburgh.
The plan I'm thinking about would have potentially affected Ulster County.
Yes.
Well, only because the water that flows into Ulster County from the Shangon
Yeah.
Kill would have been less.
Yes, a lot.
Yeah.
Couldn't be much less than it is today, you can tell you that.
Whatever happened
Well,
to that plan?
that plan died in 1982. That's why I'm here. Okay, I owe you, and this lady, and I still got the lady with the Moon Creek.
You know, it's because it's, as you saw from my question, when I emailed it in, it's complex.
Okay.
I was wondering, if this has an impact on water management, about ownership of water and the interconnection of groundwater. So I heard that, and this may not apply in New York, that in California, some farmers are piping a lot of water from the ground, and the whole water level decreases. And this can be a problem.
The short form of the question is, who owns the water? In California, Colorado, the whole West, the whole dry West, where they get 12 inches or less of rain a year, they have what they call water rights. It started back in the 1800s. And people applied to the state engineer and got a right to take water out of a stream. And the state engineer keeps track, and he says, okay, you've got the #1 right, that's a senior right, you get to take first. And everybody else has got a right, if there's still water, they can take some. If there's no water left, tough, you still get to take. And if you got a senior right and you're growing almonds and you need a gallon of almond, and you got a senior right, you can take it, according to the water law. New York, totally different. Riparian law. Here, if you drill a hole under your property, you can take the water out, as long as it doesn't impact your neighbors, and if it's a municipal or a community supply, then you got to get a permit, and the DEC is in charge of making sure that it doesn't impact everybody. But riparian, as far as surface water, you can get a permit to throw a hose in a creek and suck water out, and if it's not going to affect the biota of the creek, then DEC probably say okay. But it's totally different east and west parts of the country because it's so arid out there that they do major accounting. They have courts that are just about water. Okay, it's that serious. Okay, yes, ma'am.
Now I remember
Okay.
the other question. Depending on the water level, right? I've been told that the sulfur, you know, in its smell, right, depends on what aquifer, right, I'm drawing out of. And I can see, because there's a pond, you know, down front, and depending on the level of the pond shows, you know, that the water level is low, you know, or not. That, so there are many, many considerations with this, and whether the water is healthy or not. I mean, there's never been a problem with that I know of.
You go to Boston Spa, you love the sulfur up there.
Yeah. I can open it.
Okay.
But, all right, I'll save my other question.
Okay, so the kind of the comment was, the lower the water goes, the more prevalent the sulfur is. Very true. It's deeper, typically deeper. A deeper well will draw more sulfur. There's more. Some people tell me it's like the prehistoric decaying matter that far down that goes anaerobic and puts off hydrogen sulfide.
My sulfur decreased over the years.
It did?
Yeah, I was the only house on the block, and I had a lot of sulfur. Now there's 11 houses on the block, and they don't seem to get sulfur anymore.
Maybe all of them kind of drew the water through the aquifer and depleted the sulfur supply.
That's what I'm thinking.
We'll talk about pollution later. Anyway, let me get you a second, because this lady's been really patient. I want to point to you where the wells are by Butter Hill. Is that what your question was about?
The town of New Windsor has drilled a well adjacent to a housing development with 300 homes. That's built on a sandbank, much now to the surprise of the owners of those homes. And there had been a history in the past of an occasional sinkhole that rims their development. The well is now been drilled between the Moodna Creek and this housing development. And the sinkholes have restarted. The new foundation sinking and cracking is beginning to be seen along the rim, Creamery Drive, along Butter Hill. Directly across Moodna Creek, you can walk across it, was a former paper mill. And now the town claims that this well will yield 7 million gallons a day. If you were living in Butter Hill, it's going to solve all our problems. It will allow the town of New Windsor to not access the city aqueduct. If you were living in Butter Hill, what would you say to those residents? Now, the town has just recently found high levels of manganese. They didn't test before, now they're testing, now that they've started drilling. What would you say to the residents of Butter Hill at this point in time? Oh, I should also mention that it is spitting distance, also adjacent to the housing development it was a bridge that washed out on Forge Hill Road in the last major storm. So they put that bridge back up, and all things considered, if you were a resident of Butter Hill, what would you be concerned about at this point?
I'll show you. Okay. So, can everybody hear that? Okay. This is the mouth of the Moodna Creek. The Hudson River, Moodna Creek comes right in here. You see the pink? The town of New Windsor drilled a bunch of holes in that pink area. It's Butter Hill Park. It's down at the bottom of the hill. I don't know if anybody drove around after Hurricane Irene and Superstorm, or not so much Sandy, Lee, Tropical Storm Lee, okay? A couple of weeks apart, double whammy, a lot of people hurt. But the Forge Hill Road took a real beating, but the valley, the Moodna Creek Valley took a big beating because it's very steep right there. Coming down here, where is it? Yeah, it's here. You know, in Salisbury Mills, there's a dam, hydroelectric project. The Moodna Creek drops off like a waterfall down that valley, and it keeps on going. And that water going over that dam in Hurricane Irene just went screaming. It's the best word I can get. Okay, down that valley, past Forge Hill Road, eroded out the abutments, took out the side of the valley just upstream as it turned the corner to get to Forge Hill Road, and then it took out the other valley, which is what Butter Hill subdivision is built on, is this giant hill of sand, I'm sorry to say. Well, there's more than just sand. It's till, okay? But anyway, it took out a whole bunch. So now you got two problems. Because soils, when you pile them up, if you dig away the toe of the pile, it's going to collapse. So what the storm did is dug away the toe of the hill that the houses were sitting on top. So now it's moving. Okay? It's not, right now, it's not because of that well, because that well is not permitted. They only pump to test it. They're not allowed to pump it until they get a permit. And if I was you, I would say, hey, I want to make sure that you're not going to lower this aquifer, which is the toe of my hill, where my house is up there. And you can point to the cracks. I'm sure that there's, right? The cracks are because that's soil is moving. Okay? There's not a lot of instances around here that I know of subsidence due to over pumping. Okay? But I would say that the fact that that hill is right adjacent to the Moodna Creek, and it took a beating, and it takes a beating in every storm, I'm sure, that's probably the main cause of the subsidence. Okay? Good. One more, and then I better do my presentation. Two more, and I'll do my presentation.
There was a lot of concern over fracking.
Fracking, okay.
And what it would do to the groundwater.
Mhm.